And welcome back for more Duelyst with Blatm.
Hey, what's up?
And we're in the round of 8, so we're continuing on with somebody who we saw in the round of 16, JohnSmith, and their opponent Omega. So we've already covered JohnSmith's deck lists in an earlier cast with F8. But do you have any opinion on these, Blatm?
I mean, it's pretty much the same strategy that Solifid used in Clash 1, where they chose a really slow Lionar and a really fast Songhai, and in this format it's hard to play against because the things you would want to use against one of the decks sort of, it's the opposite of the other one, but it doesn't quite work because previously in Clash 1, it was like, everyone can play whatever you want. Now you're locked into the deck you just won with, so that sort of mix-up is not going to be quite as effective. But these are still two very strong decks, and obviously inspired by Solifid, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they've got quite far with them. Then again, so has their opponent Omega, who is running, Lionar as well, although it's a slightly different build, as well as this Magma. I know Omega was like kind of grinding pretty hard this on this open network test, and it's paid off because they've done pretty well here.
Yeah, Omega is sort of definitely taking names this tournament, doing great. Their decks are really interesting. So the Lionar deck is kind of scary to play against JohnSmith's Lionar deck because generally speaking, when you're playing the Lionar mirror and your deck is a little bit less greedy, it's so hard to win, right? Because it's a lot of, it's the matches tend to be very slow and very grindy. And if your opponent just has a few more expensive threats, then it can be really tough for you. But so the Mag deck is really, really interesting. You're super greedy with these Zuriels. JohnSmith in the Lionar deck is playing 1 Decimate. And Decimate normally you think of as sort of like a surprise card. And in open deck list format, it can be kind of surprising to see it, but it's one of those things where if you put in enough positional cards and cards that are heavily positional in the sense of you need to play around them, otherwise you instantly lose, then you can just sort of make it really hard for your opponent to play because they have so many different considerations. And here, this Zuriel is going to be really bad into that Decimate. So that's really interesting. And even though it's open decklist, this Decimate is really paying off.
I hadn't thought that because, like you said, the Decimate sort of sometimes just putting in your deck list can like force your opponent to play around it, like where maybe they even shouldn't. And a lot of the time, I sort of feel like this Zuriel would like almost break the back of a really slow deck when you get the good Zuriel and like, oh my god, he just spawned like 3 big threats off this Zuriel. I like mastered him 2 things, and they're all back as well as this huge flyer. But with that Decimate, actually, like if you just hold it for when that comes off, like they only have 1. So yeah, that's interesting actually.
Yeah, I mean, Zuriel normally is extremely good against Lionar because they basically just have Martyrdom as ways to remove big things. So yeah, like if you play an Archon, they have to Martyrdom it, and then use Zuriel, and they have 2 things they have to Martyrdom. It's not going to happen, right? So Zuriel's basically instantly going to win against these slow Lionars, except for the Decimate. So I think you can probably still try and find a way to work around 1 Decimate, but that 1 card is definitely completely changing the dynamic of what's going on.
Yeah. So I think if I was Omega, I might pick this Magma list to start with, but let's get into it and see what I actually did. We're on Omega vs. JohnSmith. He's looking to replace into a 2-drop and finds one.
What a god. That is... you could choose your draws? I mean, it would definitely be that, right? That was extremely risky to only replace 1 card when you don't have a turn 1. And Kuchada.
They might get bigly rewarded by this Zenrui, the 4-mana ramp Zenrui.
Yeah, I mean, Zenrui is really unexpected to me. This is a full 9 5-drops in the Magmar deck. 3 Harvester, 3 Dancing Blades, 3 Zenrui. And that's sort of how many 5-drops you have like that really impacts that really defines the character of these Magmar decks. So this one is super greedy because it has those 9 5-drops.
But a nice Tempest.
Yeah, wow, that's really strong. I mean, that's about as good as that Tempest is going to get, because Omega doesn't have a lot of cheap cards, a lot of low health minions.
Yeah, they're not exactly a swarm deck. Like, say, with so many 5-drops, I was like gonna say, like, in 2-draw, like a bunch of 5-drops, doesn't necessarily equate with a big throughput of cards. Like, you can spend your like mid game, putting out 1 card a turn and drawing back up. So yeah, it's interesting to see them get triple value on that Tempest.
Yeah, and here JohnSmith really has to answer this Vindicator, because if they just play some minions, then a Vindicator out Dancing Blades is really, really, really strong. Also, it does a really good job blanking the Spirit Harvester. If you've got no minions, then Harvester is a lot less good.
Yeah, this Harvester is weird. I think I'd just flash the Archon, even like if you think it's going to get martyrdom. Like, this Spirit Harvester seems odd to me. It didn't do anything.
I think Omega's setting up for playing Archon next turn and then going Flash Zuriel.
Right, yeah, so they're thinking ahead. That's probably smart. It is interesting, though, that they did draw the second Archon, so my line of play would have been rewarded, but not necessarily through any sort of foresight.
And then Omega also had a choice there of hitting with the 2/1 Young Silithar and then losing the egg, versus not doing that. And the difference is 2 damage versus, constraining JohnSmith a little bit. They can either punch this egg if they're planning on removing the Harvester, or they can ignore it if they're not going to be removing the Harvester, because the Harvester will kill the egg before it hatches.
Yeah, this is something that doesn't get talked about much. In my experience, it sort of only comes into play against Swarm and maybe like these Rebirth egg decks, but you have an action economy, right? Like, you only get so many actions of your units per turn. Like, if you have 3 minions on board in your general, you can do 4 actions. But if you only have your general on board, you only get to choose one thing, what you're going to hit. And Omega's like saying, hey, you've got to hit this egg. You can't walk up to me and equip your Regala or anything. You got to hit this egg.
Yeah.
Although, actually, funnily enough, JohnSmith chooses the third way, doesn't hit the egg at all. Do you know the sequencing? Does the egg hatch and then take 2 damage, or does it destroy the egg?
Yeah, so the egg is going to die here. So JohnSmith knows this and just sort of showing off their game knowledge, right, by not hitting it. But it makes a difference if JohnSmith was planning on clearing the Harvester, then he would have to hit the egg.
so a lot of mind games here, and just an immediate pass turn. This is definitely funny. We got a bit of an odd game going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because so if you look at JohnSmith's deck, they have to come up with like a pretty specific game plan in this matchup. Like, how are they going to win, right? Because a lot of this, usually they'd win with their 3 Archon, 2 Zir, but when you're playing against a meta deck, and meta is in Metamorphosis, not
yeah. I was wondering if that oops was for a Decimate, because Omega played right into it there.
Oh yeah, that's definitely, because of course Omega didn't play into the Decimate. He would love for JohnSmith to Decimate here, because then he can Zuriel and the game's over. And I think JohnSmith knows this, so JohnSmith is never going to Decimate before the Zuriel comes down, unless they absolutely have to. So Omega doing their best.
Omega's not that far into their deck. I don't think it's a bad gamble to say, you probably haven't drawn Zero yet. Although,
the thing is that the game is going to go really long, right? I mean, this is why you see like JohnSmith just passing without taking any action. It says, oh, you have Harvesters on board. I'm not really worried about my health because he's got all these Sun Drops, all these Circles of Life, in addition to the Rejuve Mystic stuff. So he's not worried about his HP total, really. And he knows that this game could easily go to fatigue, right? And he's thinking about all the threats in his deck and all the answers in his deck versus all the threats and all the answers in Omega's deck. And there's no reason to waste them unnecessarily. So he's happy just passing. Sometimes when he plays a Lion like he did a few turns ago, it's because the Lion is never going to do anything in its matchup, and he just needs to draw more cards to find the stuff he needs to find.
And I know this is now going back a few turns even, but when that young Silthar didn't attack, it's because 2 damage really does not matter in the scope of this game.
Yeah, exactly. It was absolutely the right choice that Omega made to not attack with the young Silthar because, this is going to be about, who has the last threat, right? Like who can who can grind the opponent out and who can sort of have more must-answer things than there are answers. This is really interesting from Omega because by bringing back the 2 Harvesters, it's sort of tempting JohnSmith into not using their Decimate and saying, it's all going to die next turn. Maybe I can just not Decimate, and then maybe Omega has something in mind. So this is a really a very tricky play that Omega's making and putting JohnSmith in a very difficult situation. And it looks like it's it's working out.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting quirk of Spirit Harvester, where when it's not in your opponent's face, and you don't have the option of trading it in at will, it's actually it can sometimes be a bit of a liability, like when it gets repulsed away or juxtapositioned away.
Yeah, and then here, now of course the Decimate doesn't look appealing, and JohnSmith is. I think that maybe Omega miscalculated with that greater fortitude, but
I mean, maybe we can't see his hand. It really depends how much healing he has in it, because he could immediately go back up to 19 HP here easily.
Yeah, I mean, so Omega's choosing. It's like a really interesting line how they've sort of spotted this opening, this opportunity that they've set up for themselves by knowingly bringing back 2 Harvesters and convincing JohnSmith, oh, you really don't need to Decimate, don't worry. And now they're at 4, and they have a hard thing that they need to do. They need to take care of these threats and also heal themselves, and they only have 9 mana. So it's going to be difficult for JohnSmith to find the way out of this. And even if they do, it's not like Omega is out of threats or anything. I mean, they still have a lot of things in their deck that they can win the game with. So
yeah, absolutely. That's like the thing about these fatigue decks is if you're slowly and predictably putting damage on them, 5 damage this turn, 4 damage that turn, they can handle it. If you do 0 damage this turn and then 19 damage the next turn, what are they gonna do? They can't reliably deal with that. Well, it's not bad.
Yeah. So here, JohnSmith, just going into Zero mode. And this is still scary. These Plasma Storms are not looking great. I mean, Plasma is not really going to do that much in this matchup. But 12 HP is not a lot. And being in Zero mode is scary because you can never heal over 12.
Exactly. Your max HP is set.
Yeah. So this was a big win for Omega. Also, JohnSmith basically passed their turn, right? Spending 7 mana, turning into a 0, and then of course Omega can just play a bunch of things.
Which they have done, which is threatening JohnSmith with a lethal. He's gonna have something to deal with this.
Yeah, they have been. Their turns have been extremely anemic. They haven't really been playing that much. So. Wow, I'm surprised. I was totally expecting JohnSmith to have the answer here, but
me too.
Great job to Omega. That was extremely impressive play. How they found a really creative, dynamic attack. That they noticed how the match was going and sort of made a choice in the moment to exploit some chink in the armor that JohnSmith's play suggested they had. It was very, very, very good play.